everyone. I'm a socially awkward idiot, and today I would like to share with all of you my... Hi, Ponyo! Sorry. Again, Ponyo is being a nuisance. But anyway, I would like to share with you all my story about Mary Jane, the devil's lettuce, the Tangrowth smoke. So weed is not illegal where I live. I am not condoning doing illegal substances at all. I did not do weed until it was legal where I live. I am a good girl, so it is legal where I live. First of all, let's just start that off. So I decided to try it out. A lot of my friends did weed in high school and said it was awesome. It helped my wife a lot with her pain, so I was like, okay, I'll try it. It's probably just gonna be like getting drunk. It was not like getting drunk. It was horrible. So first off, I made the rookie mistake that many people do, where we got edibles because my wife has many chronic health problems, and I know that smoking weed is not as bad as smoking cigarettes, but it still does affect your lungs. And I know all the stoners out there are going to be like, no, it doesn't. It doesn't affect your lungs at all. And like, it's not as bad as like other things you could smoke, but it's still like it's going to affect your lungs, right? So we got edibles. We didn't do smoking. We got edibles. Be careful with edibles because you do not feel anything at first, especially if you've never done weed before. You don't really feel anything at first, so you think you need more, but you don't need more. But in the moment, when you're just slightly high and don't realize that you're high because you've never been high before and don't know what that is, you think, I need more. I have a very high alcohol tolerance, so I thought that somehow factored into it. I thought maybe I just have a very high tolerance because I already have a high alcohol tolerance. So clearly I just need more. So it was fine at first. I felt like I was floating. I started laughing, and every laugh felt like it was like lifting me. I felt like I was a bell that someone was ringing, and every time someone rung the bell, the sound was colors. I felt like I was a little wind bell being like jingled like a bell, and that the sound waves were coming out of me in visual colors. I felt tingly. I felt I was like laughing a lot. I felt happy. It was good. And then all of a sudden I stopped being able to see. I couldn't see anything except for myself. I felt like I was looking at myself, only instead of looking like the butchy human that you see before you, I looked like Littlefoot from The Land Before Time, drawn in crayon. So I was just staring at myself, which was Littlefoot drawn in crayon, and I was like, I know this isn't what I look like. This is wrong. And I felt like I had the dinosaur feet. I felt like I had the long neck, like I could feel like that's what my body felt like. Like my body felt like I looked like this, and like I was fuzzy because it was a crayon drawing, and crayons kind of have that like weird fuzziness to them when you draw with them. So I thought I was like a crayon dinosaur, and I felt like I was a crayon dinosaur, and all I could see was myself, the crayon dinosaur. And I was like, I know this isn't right. I know this isn't what I'm supposed to look like. So I was freaking out because I was like, this is wrong. This isn't what I look like. But I couldn't remember what I did look like. So I couldn't like visualize how I was supposed to look. So I was just stuck looking like a crayon dinosaur. And it was like freaking me out. And then my little cat comes up and she meows at me because I think she could tell something's wrong. She's very good at that. She can always tell when something's wrong. So she comes up and she meows at me. And it was like, until that moment, my mind was so occupied with the crayon dinosaur thing, I didn't remember that she existed. So I like was like, oh my God, I have a cat. And then I was just like going through her whole life. I was just like, oh my God, I have this cat and I got her from this foster care program, and like her mom was like a feral cat who was brought in and had kittens, and like she was one of the kittens, and like she was the last one to be adopted. Like even her mom got adopted before her, and I was like, oh my God. Like I just all of a sudden remembered all this because I had like forgotten it before somehow. And then I remembered that I got her as a birthday present for my wife. And because on my wife's birthday, she had her first cardiologist appointment, because as I mentioned earlier, she's got chronic health problems. So on her 21st birthday, she had to go to the cardiologist. So I got her a kitten to try to make her feel better. Anyway, so I just all of a sudden remembered that all this had happened because I didn't remember it before because I was so focused on the crayon dinosaur thing. And then I just started like remembering things that had happened in my life, but it was like my head was so fuzzy. I could only hold in like one memory at a time. So it was like I would have like one flashback memory and then that would go and I would have another one, and it was like nothing else existed except me remembering that thing that I was remembering at that moment. But also there was like a part in the back of my mind that like knew that I was supposed to be able to remember everything at once, that I wasn't supposed to only have one memory at a time, and that same part of my brain also knew that I was supposed to be able to like see the world, but I couldn't remember what the world looked like. I could only remember like through my memories. I didn't remember what the room I was in looked like, and I felt like I couldn't see. I could only see the memories before me. And I was so engaged in this, I didn't know what I was doing physically, but my wife told me afterward that apparently I was just screaming and thrashing this whole time because I was so freaked out. It was on this very couch. So I was just like screaming and thrashing and like crying and sobbing this whole time. So I'm going through this cascade of memories and like freaking out that I can only remember one thing at a time and knowing I should be remembering more, and like freaking out that my brain is broken and that there's like something wrong with me, and like just like having a horrible time. I assume that I fell asleep at this point. My wife tells me that I was screaming and crying and then all of a sudden fell asleep. So I assume that this part happened after I fell asleep because all of a sudden the horrible like memory train and everything stopped, and all of a sudden I was just a word. I existed as a word, and that word was pulsing. Like remember the bell thing I talked about earlier? It was that same thing, only I was a word. It was like the word, and I was pulsing. And then I was like, oh, this makes sense, because when you die, the last thing you think is going to be one single word. And that word is what God is. And so everything makes sense because God is the last word everyone thinks as they die. And now I'm the last word everyone thinks as they die. And because I am one with God in this moment. That's what I thought. And every time and as I was thinking this, I would like hit the end of a sentence, and the word at the end of that sentence would like pulse out. And I became that word. And then I would realize, oh, I'm this word now. And then it would be the word now, 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 now. Then I would be like, everything makes sense. No matter what word is the last word I think, that will be the last word. So everything will make sense. So right now the last word is sense, but it could be something else. It was like that, basically, just like repeated cycling thoughts like that. And I woke up and I could see the world finally. And I was like, oh my God, I can see. And my wife is crying because she doesn't know what's wrong with me. And she's like, what's happening? I don't know how to help you. What's going on? And I was like, don't worry. Everything's fine now. I can see again. The cat was still there, but I remembered who she was this time. I felt all good. And then all of a sudden, I felt like this tingling inside my mouth. And I was like, I knew that the bad trip I just had, where the thing was that I like couldn't remember anything and could only hold one thought in my head at a time, that was like, all of that was just in my mouth. And I somehow knew that that was in my mouth. And I told her, it's in my mouth. I need some water to like wash it down so it doesn't come out. And she was like, what do you mean? Like, what does that mean? And I was like, don't worry, but it's in my mouth and it's going to escape unless I get some water. So my poor wife runs and gets me some water. I like chug a bunch of water and it goes down for like a second, or maybe it was longer. Time was weird. It goes down and then it comes back. It's like in my mouth and it's like escaping my mouth. And I remember screaming, oh God, it's happening again. Just scared my poor wife. And I laid back down and it was like the whole same thing all over again, with the cycle of like only being able to hold one thing in my head at a time, but knowing I was supposed to have more in my head and freaking out. And like the whole cycle, and I guess I must have fallen asleep again, because then it was back to the whole like pulsing word, end of the universe, end of everything, God thing, whatever. And like then I like woke up and I went to the bathroom and I threw up. Just threw up everywhere. And then I went to sleep. I had very strange dreams. I do not remember them as clearly as I remember everything else. I don't know why I remember everything else so clearly. I don't remember what those dreams were. And I woke up the next morning. Felt a little fuzzy, but otherwise normal. And I was like, what the heck happened? As everyone I knew who did weed, everyone who talked about weed was just like, it makes you relaxed and like giggly. Like when I was looking up stuff online about it, because of course I was, because I'm anxious, so I look up things online before I do anything. I looked up things online, everything was just like, it makes you giggly and like whatever. I was like, I knew I had so many friends who did weed, none of them had ever had this experience with it. My wife didn't have this experience with it. I was like, what is going on? So I Googled like bad trip and weed, and like everything was just like, oh, you can't have a bad trip on weed. Like that doesn't happen. Like you can't have a bad trip. That's not how weed is. And like this wasn't like bad weed. This was weed from a dispensary. This wasn't like mixed with some other weird shit. Like this was like real stuff, you know? So it wasn't like I got slipped something. It was like straight up weed that gave me this reaction. So I was like, okay, maybe I just had, like, I probably just had way too much. So like next time we won't do that. So next time I had like barely any. And this, maybe because I had less weed, but this trip was not as vivid as the other one. but it was like the same thing. I felt like I was a crayon dinosaur, and then like I couldn't hold memories in my head. I didn't scream because I kind of knew it was coming, so I didn't scream this time. I had like the awareness not to scream, but I just kind of laid there and I was like, it's happening again and I need to go to sleep. My wife was like, what do you mean? And I was like, it's happening again and I need to go to sleep right now to make it stop. So I went to sleep and I slept through like the whole thing. So I wouldn't have that horrible reaction, and I just like made myself stay asleep. So then I was like, okay, this has happened twice in a row. I had barely any weed at all the second time, and basically the same thing happened. So clearly something's going on. So I realized I have things going on in my brain. I have several mental illnesses. So I search my various mental illnesses and weed, and finally this thing comes up that's like, a lot of people that have various mental illnesses do experience really bad trips on weed. Like if you already have like some different mental illnesses, there hasn't been like an official study on it obviously, but there's a lot of anecdotal things where people who have mental illness, it's not everyone obviously, some people with mental illness have these kinds of really horrible trips. And I was like, oh my gosh, it is a real thing. It's not just me. So apparently I just got unlucky. The way my mental illnesses are, I cannot have weed at all because it gives me horrible, terrible, bad trips. So that's my weed story. The moral, I guess, is if you are mentally ill, be very careful about what you put in your body if it's something that affects the brain. Not everyone reacts the same, even if it's something that's considered very like, most people say that like it's completely fine, like weed. Like, be careful if you're mentally ill because you might have a reaction like me. I'm not saying that to scare anyone. I'm not anti-weed. Clearly my wife uses it medicinally. And I know lots of friends who use it recreationally. So I'm not anti-weed or anything, but I'm just saying, if you're going to try it for the first time, be in a safe place, have friends with you, preferably at least one sober friend, so that if you do end up having a really horrible reaction, someone is there. Especially if you have serious mental illnesses like I do. That was just kind of me reliving this bad trip. I hope that it was funny for people and not just like upsetting. It was kind of upsetting for me. I hope it was funny. If you want, if you have horrible bad drug experiences, maybe don't leave them in the comments unless you want to. I mean, I don't care what you leave in the comments, but oh Lord, that was my experience. I hope that you all have better experiences in life in general, regardless of what substances you do or don't choose to use. Like if you liked, subscribe if you subscribed, share if you shared. Bye bye.